Right, so notice the meeting has been circulated. Right, Janine, if you can do the Karakia. Please.
Well, te hau ki te huru, taka te hau ki te tonga, ki a ma kina kina ki uta, ki a ma taratara ki tai. E hiaki ana te tukura, e tio, e kuka, e hauru, e hei, mo reo.
Thank you, Janine. The health and safety statement is per page 5.
We can take it as read if you like.
Everybody's taken it as read, so we'll move on to the agenda. And the apologies for the meeting, Mr. Meyer, his absence. I don't know that he's online. No, he's not. I think he's driving today. So to move the warrants, would this be accepted? Thanks. In favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. All item is the confirmation of the agenda.
Happy to move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Favour?
Aye.
Carried. First where we do.
My fingers, it's too early for them to see.
Okay, disclosures of interest have been notified. Has anybody else anything else to declare? If not, we shall move to the next agenda item. Submission to Auckland Council draft long-term plan. Going to speak on that one? Thank you very much.
Jane was looking at
Sorry, Jane. Okay, sorry.
The
Haven's deputy.
The purpose of the report is to present our submission on Council's draft long-term plan. Take the submission as read. Staff have reviewed the draft LTP by Auckland Council and have put together a submission addressing the issues that are the council.
Thanks for that. Do you have any questions? The transport gurus over here.
I sent through a quick email last night to Janine, I'll say, Tracy and Phil, and just had a couple of comments in there. One is mainly around paragraph 7 to 9 about Te Huia. I suggested that we would reframe that. I thought it was a bit brief, and that if I was an Auckland City Councillor reading it at the submission, I'd need a bit more detail in the ask for them to contribute towards Te Huia. And so I went on to say, I'd reword this to tell a story of how we built up the startup service, are now at a point where we request their help to take it to the next step before being ready to expand as a solution to get the benefits that meet both our council's aspirations for our communities. I'd add why we didn't ask for the contribution earlier, because that's part of the history, and that we suspect any government wishes to move this to a more standard financial assistance rate in future, being that 51% that we talk about in there, and that this would match others who have been successful in seeking funding for expansion of their services, i.e. Greater Wellington Regional Council and Horizons. So rather than just saying, hey, we have a problem and leaving it that to a degree, that was my suggestion. So it's just keen to hear feedback from Phil or Janine or others. Or others can just contribute what they also thought about those paragraphs. Then I had two other small differences, but we can deal with it.
To respond, if you like, I think those are good questions, and they're points that we need to bring out more to reflect somebody who isn't as aware of the Te Huia story as perhaps the authors were when this was written. I think we have been asking for money all the way from day one from Auckland, and I think tried to bring that out, that we have gone back since the launch of Te Huia and asked for money again, but we have been doing so since prior to the launch, so maybe we should bring that out a little more as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So whether you wanted to agree the statements that we should include here, or whether you were happy for us to take those comments away and adjust the final version of those you wish.
I'm comfortable leaving that that intent does come through, but keen to hear from others whether you have any opinions on. I just put forward.
Yeah, probably for me, yeah, I'd agree with what everything Jen has said. Just the heading as well. Hamilton to Auckland. It kind of misses the point of where we're the whole point of Tahuia is
We're trying to see, yeah.
connecting Hamilton and Auckland. So maybe instead of starting with Tahuia to regional passenger rail, connecting Hamilton and Auckland. Here and then. Subsequent paragraphs. For me, there was lots of uncertainty within our submission. So we know that, things are, we're waiting on Wakakutahi for their review. But just, it's kind of like we're asking, but hey, but only for 3 years, but maybe in the future they will come back. And it's kind of like, just not really bold enough for my liking. I think, what we're proposing really does connect Hamilton and Auckland. So we need to be bold in that future corridor aspirations about, making a resilient transport corridor through to enable more than just people travelling, but to enable housing and economic development along that corridor as well. Yeah, so even in paragraph 9, just get rid of, be really bold. So in the longer term, we continue to engage with you about how have that balanced north-south, south-north. And then also about the rolling stock, I think it's really important that we tell them that it will be Auckland specifications and also around what it is, so that we can go further into Auckland with won't be diesel, it will be battery electric, whatever it's going to be, and because that will alleviate some of those fears what they've got at the moment about Tahuia breaking down, holding them up. Dwell time at stations is really limited because you can't get wheelchairs off in the 90 seconds that we're allowed. So yeah, if we could just add a little bit more detail around that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Angela. Pam, have you got any comments?
No, I'm happy with what's been put forward. Are we gonna request to speak to this submission? Oh, I think we should. I think we should be blatant about that. We have a,
Able to answer
yeah.
questions.
yeah,
Should we not have covered them? Well,
yeah.
Dialogue.
Yeah.
Just a written submission.
So I've got a couple of comments, but also, as you're probably aware, I've got the contribute, probably more supportive of the Auckland view at the moment, but there's probably cheaper and more efficient alternatives for public transport between Auckland and Hamilton. And that's not mentioned in here, and I think if we're going to submit something, then we need to refute those arguments that are being promoted by the Auckland Council. Otherwise, you'll get the same response that you did last time. A question to Phil. Paragraph 6, Phil, we haven't seen the report yet that's being submitted to the Minister. And we're making a comment in there about reductions in emissions. Now, the message that I'm getting in the report, the initial report that I saw, that is not a true statement. So I think we need to make sure that whatever we might put in here is factually correct, and we're able to support that.
That original report was done by the Chamber of Commerce, who used Auckland University of Waikato work. We did not support that at the time it was released. It was prior to my time. The information we've used all the way through to who it comes from information from the Ministry of Transport, which is based on the emissions per car undertaking a trip of that length. And we've consistently talked about emissions being at a neutral point when there are 55 people on board a train. And we've used that number all the way through all of the reporting that we've done for the last 2 years. So I'm comfortable that what we've been saying does reflect a reduction in emissions that is different from that work that the Chamber of Commerce led. The Chamber of Commerce in the background then spent another 9 to 12 months redoing that work with another student. That work has never been issued. They've never provided us with a copy of any of that work, and the Chamber haven't presented any of the results of that new work that they did, because I don't think it tells them what they want it to say. So I can bring that out more if that helps just reset our position on emissions, which is the one that we've used.
I want to make sure there's nothing in here which is not, that we've verified with independent information, and that we're confident the facts are correct, that there's it's irrefutable. Otherwise, they'll just throw it straight back at you.
Yeah.
So in that regard, I'd hope to think that somebody's done the analysis, and we've got something to support that.
Yes.
Okay. And the second point is in number 11. Projections are expected to change the way we access and use fresh water in the future. Can somebody explain what this has got to do with fresh water use?
Moving away from
Oh, sorry, climate change. Sorry, I was reading it as part of the same submission. Thank you.
I could just add one more thing on that transport one. I totally agree with evidence-based always has to be, really rock solid in these on principle. But I did find that at the end of paragraph 9, there was reference to emissions reductions, and I just thought that's not the ultimate objective of this. It's all those other things that bring the benefits to those communities. And so I would just reframe that to say all of these things while supporting a transition to, because then it has the potential, obviously, patronage as well. Just shifting the focus, I thought it was a bit, and so I know it's weird coming from me, but it's a bit heavy on pushing the emission reduction aspect, but I think the train adds so much more than that, and we should highlight that first. And a quick question was, do we have anything else to put in here around, for example, do we wish to request their advocacy to support electrification of the rail line between anything else like that could help them to keep pushing that's part of the package of an Auckland Hamilton connection being successful in the future?
A more resilient rail.
We certainly did within the presentation we gave back in October, so it would not be inconsistent for us to repeat those messages here. We're supporting.
Can we broaden it to a comment on resiliency of rail and investment in rail as alternative mode for either passengers or freight? I don't know.
I think that was somewhere in there anyway, but
GPS.
yeah.
Being consistent between.
So you could,
Yeah.
could add that in both.
I just think that, what I've heard out of Auckland is an appetite for investment around rail infrastructure. So if we can come in behind that and say we endorse that as well, and would love to see that investment bridge the two regions, that is another thing to talk about.
Probably one more thing as well is in 3 to 5, sort of a bit silent about Poko and Pokeno and how we could improve those bus services up there.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I don't know if this is the place, but yeah, even working together, Pukikoe come down and service those two little. It's all based on water catchments rather than actual common sense.
So we did mention that back in October when we talked about Te Hui, but if you wanted us to, we could add a little in there about connecting communities and access to education, health, social outcomes across boundaries.
I think it links to the interregional nature of wanting to work together to make that make sense for the community as the boundary is.
And when we're mentioning those things, education, health, social. Can we make sure that we're putting in employment as well? Because so many people do it for economic.
I think you're far more likely to get by if you actually take Mayor Brown's comments about buses into account in the submission, because that's his suggestion. And what he says, there's a bit of weight up there. And it might go against what you're trying to achieve, but what we're doing is not youth. I don't know. We took the grandchildren into the museum recently, and there's a big thing there with the rail service and the costs of it between Hamilton, Auckland and Tauranga. That was back in the early 1920s, so it's not new.
What do you mean, like in regards to Pokeno and Tuaka?
Oh, a bus service between connecting Auckland, an improved bus service, like the trainers.
We need that. Well, yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think if including that in here is more likely to get support than immediate financial support from Auckland on the train.
Yeah, I think there's two different issues.
Yeah, but let's add it, because if it's, going to land well,
But
then
it is part of the public transport connection.
I think what we're signaling in this is that we would like joined up conversations
Yes.
between the regions so that we can provide the services to both of our communities.
so it's seamless for them.
Yeah, exactly, because that is how it is to them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's
Should
how
be.
they would like it to be.
Yeah.
I suppose and since this is on their whole LTP, and I've of course not read their whole LTP. I'm just thinking about the commentary of Pukekohe and Pokeno and Tuakau, that some of those conversations go beyond transport. That I have heard commentary from say the horticulture industry talking about the confusion or the frustration when there are different rules. Yeah, different consenting rules right on the boundary. So you've got one landowner that's got some land in Auckland region and some in the Waikato region, and everything seems to be get very difficult in terms of any sort of coordination. So I don't know if there's a place to raise it, or if there was anything in their LTP that was in relation to whether it's freshwater management or farm plans or anything like that.
They had a very long consultation document, didn't they? There's probably maybe a hook in there if we go back and look into it, Jane, around bringing that through potentially. It's just that was the first comment was, I guess it's rule based is what I feel like the problem I heard around that is. I just wonder if that's an LTP one or.
Because what's the ask?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just reflecting, Chris, I know you've been in some of those conversations as well. And if there's an opportunity to reflect those in our submission.
I think it's a good idea, Pam. The problem that I see in it is that the people who are making those comments were much more complimentary about the Auckland engagement than our engagement with them. So maybe they'll throw that straight back at us. But I think it's an important point that we should be making, because I think there seemed to be a genuine effort from Auckland to engage with the people down here, and that's probably because of their Franklin carryover, that they're used to having that engagement, whereas we haven't had the same history with Auckland. And that's probably, so whether there's an opportunity to include something in here to if you like, put the hand out to welcome them, and vice versa, because we need to be invited to them as much as they need to be invited here.
Is that just an overarching statement?
That's what I'm wondering.
Of the, the importance of Auckland to the Waikato, and, the
And
desire, vice versa.
Yeah.
But, the willingness to be working together and having some of these strategic conversations, just as an overarching.
Absolutely. One of the people there is a very strong proponent of putting it, and I've done all the mapping. He's paid for us out of it. It's probably not relevant, but it is relevant for this submission, to put a new highway through borders Pukekohe, comes back through Openite and joins up with State Highway 1 which also connects the rail line. So he wants to have a joint railway and motorway connection beside the existing motor, well, in addition to the existing motorway. And that's more for heavy traffic, take it off the Bombay Hills. That's more strategic and long term as well. That requires engagement with the minister rather than working the city as such, because it needs land buying and all sorts of things. So there's a big project there for somebody if they want to get into it.
I take your point that it may not be an LTP comment that I was directly referring to, but I think that there should be room, as you say, Janine, to make a comment about things will be better if we work more collectively and cohesively to identify.
It's an artificial line on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
map.
It is, it is.
Did move when they moved
Yeah.
to the city. So
Yeah.
that's how artificial it is. Okay.
I need two other things and then that's me for the whole thing. So one was on the paragraph 12 on climate change. I'd reference our climate action roadmap since we're talking about and reiterating any opportunity to collaborate since that was the point of the roadmap. And we talk about these already. And in paragraph 15, and all of those coastal work paragraphs, I just thought it's great we're complimenting them on the fact that they're doing these things. But I just thought as a councillor reading that, I would think, well, what are you doing, Waikato? We could add a couple of sentences about the fact we're increasing investment, planning to increase investment in the coastal marine area ourselves, just to show, look, we're like you. We're all moving in the same direction. It backs up the whole, this is why we should work together. Yeah. That was all I had. Thanks very much.
Okay. Else, any questions? If not, we have a
Chris, you had a question on. Did you?
oh, no, it's all right. It was, yeah, like under climate change, it's relevant. Yes, I was reading it as part of the to her submission. Wasn't aware that to her he was using a lot of fresh water.
I hope not.
Like, if you could burn it, it would be useful. It's all right. Thank you. All right, if nothing further, submission resolution is on the board.
I've added a piece that will note the changes as discussed during the meeting.
So,
It's fine, yeah. Happy to move that.
thanks, Jim.
Oh, that's 1 second. There's only 3 of us that can. Yeah. Yeah.
All in favour?
Aye.
Sure. Right, so the next submission. Sarah? Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Morning.
Chair.
It's been here a long time.
I haven't slept, please.
Sorry.
I have, it's okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me join you this morning. So my manager, Sarah, wasn't able to today, but I am briefed on the submission that we've created. So I know there'll be 2 transport experts on the other side of the table that know about the government policy statement. So the government policy statement on land transport has been released by the government. The comment on the strategic direction that the government wants for the next 10 years and the funding categories that are attached to investment in transport activities. So it gives us an opportunity to present our Waikato view of it. One of the key focuses for us here, obviously, we are a public transport authority, and there are implications in the GPS for us in terms of public transport. The submission as written was very deliberately crafted to be quite succinct. We know that the Ministry of Transport are very likely to receive a lot of submissions on this, and they have approximately, we might be able to correct, approximately 10 days to turn around all of their views on it. So we, as a council, we actually have 2 opportunities to submit. We have one from the entity as the regional council, the authority responsible for the adoption of the regional land transport plan. We also will be making a regional transport committee submission, and the regional transport committee submission is actually quite substantial. So some of the points that are in here are expounded on further to give some more depth behind it. So the key areas that we are wanting to make sure that we are being heard on as a regional council, as opposed to the regional transport committee, are making sure that we are seeing a movement towards genuine 10-year investment for transport, because we've seen a bit of misalignment between the planning processes to date, between the regional land transport plan and the quite late arrival of the government policy statement. And so where we are looking to make change, we have just highlighted it throughout there. So we've focused on the areas of system reform and the strategic priorities that are included within the submission and in the GPS. So travel choice will be a key issue for us. Public transport is a key issue for us, which we've just highlighted. And I'm conscious of some of Councillor Nichols' feedback that I have read through, which I'm hoping that the RTC report might be able to address some of those specific concerns on. But
Yeah, cool.
I'll have you ask your questions in a few moments. And we're wanting to continue to see the expansion of a multimodal network coming through. We've seen a reduced focus in walking and cycling and rail investment, which has been a driver of where we've been growing to as over the last few years. We also just note that there is an opportunity for inclusion of new investment in our national significance and our support for that. If there's going to be investment in our region, we want to make sure we are enabling that, and we can make sure that's adapted to suit the needs of our region. And again, we are broadly supportive of the concept of value for money, but we need to note that in terms of what we need to get out of it, public transport needs to be specifically provided for. And then we have also just noted that the investment in land transport generally has to be balanced, I think, than what we've seen come through in the GPS. But that's probably my high level overview, and happy to take questions from the committee.
Thanks very much. Maybe I'll just start in number 8. This very roundabout. I just wonder why we're not pushing for an overbridge tunnel arrangement like they've done on the expressway further north. It's far more, it's more costly, but it's much more efficient in terms of transport movement. Having a roundabout there is, I don't believe, is the ultimate answer, and it might be what we end up with, but we should be going for perfection up front rather than second best. I don't know how we find that to them. We're experts at this.
That's a very tricky one for their design. I mean, we can definitely reflect it back to them. I think because with that PRD roundabout, it's Phil might be able to correct me on some of this too. The design for it has been taken account of where it terminates at the end of a potential extension between the end of the Cambridge section of the expressway where it terminates, or at PRD. So in those situations, generally a roundabout is the end-to-end point solution. If that were a continuation further south, it might have a different form and function in terms of an intersection. But for being able to address the short-term safety issues that are attached to that intersection and to provide regular traffic flow in the interim until these other infrastructures are built, the roundabout will improve safety at that point. So that's what was determined as being the optimum solution for now, because the previous extension of that expressway hadn't been confirmed. And so that was sort of where the Waka Kotahi designers had sort of landed.
That's where they've landed and the work is underway, so it may be too late, but I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the first intersection that will be south of Warkworth on that road eventually.
Yeah,
it's the first place you'd stop since the Cambridge Buttery piece is built.
So we want to have a bottleneck in the middle of our region.
So The other thing I would add though is that along the existing corridor, there is a heap of money being spent on wire ropes and turning bays and a big safety program that is underway along the existing corridor, even though based on this announcement, they will accelerate the new corridor, which at the mobile, it goes the other side of the mobile and then in pretty much a straight line. So from that point on is off stream to the current. So all of the improvements from mobile down to State Highway 29 will become local road eventually. So there's a timing issue in this. An acceleration of the Roads of National Significance program from the southern end of the Cambridge bypass is kind of happening in the middle of all of that construction that's underway. So I think it's a point that we could make, or we should make, but it may not be resolved until that new road is built, and it will add a cost to that new road when and if they change it to grade separation later on.
It's just, I think, like spending money now when know you're going to change it sometime in the future is not a good investment. And, if they're looking 10 years, then that other extra extension down to T-Round and further south may well be in that 10-year plan.
Yeah, I suspect it will be.
So it makes sense to put the lot together now. Anyway, that was just my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Challenge is that that's money was identified in the New Zealand upgrade program maybe 5 years ago. So it should have been built 3 years ago. I think that's only just started. Which is
You do make a good point, Chris. I've had brought that up in the RTC before about the flyover, but have been reassured by what I hear that it is last 10 to 20 years. But to me, looking at the whole corridor and then the corridor through to Tauranga, a flyover makes more sense. Like you'd have it Pocono.
So, and note the comment before about the RTC submissions yet to be developed and considered, something that could equally flow into that one. That for consistency, and if RTC committee is also.
So the RTC submission hopefully will be with RTC members for comment later today.
Cool.
We went through the RAG group yesterday. So that's the staff version of the RTC in the background.
Sure.
There are several changes Nigel's making to that document this morning to get that out to RTC members. So that is that much fuller version. We in terms of your question around a lot of that context is missing from this. We have material there that we could put into this, but this will effectively then make this the same length as everything else that the government will receive. If you felt that we should do that, we have the material there to do it relatively easily.
There's possibly a happy medium of a shortened version of what you've developed for RTC, just to beef it up a little. Stay consistent, but you could go into more detail with the RTC. Just for the things that make sense for the whole of councils. Yeah. And trust you to figure it out.
Can I just get a feel?
Totally.
Can I get a feel for what you think is more logical in the RTC submission versus our submission? I'm not sure where the dividing line would be.
So the RTC submission that we've prepared does have that full regional view applied to it, and where I think the focus that we'd had when the WRC submission was prepared was actually thinking about what is for our council, and so taking account of the fact that we're a public transport authority. We've seen significant reductions in the public transport investment activity class, but equally areas that we're also interested in for cycling and where again funding has been curtailed, and so making an effort to make sure that sort of our council interests are captured and represented. And for the RTC, it's the broader context of transport and how it operates within the Waikato generally. And so we've gone into probably more depth about long-term planning. We've covered more. We've been probably bolder in the recommendations about what's required coming through in the RTC report. So we haven't necessarily gone into that same level of depth with the WRC one. We've highlighted those key areas that change needs to be made. where through the RTC, we've actually made specific recommendations under each of the theme headings that have come through. So the difference is that I see is the WOC one is focused on the core issues that are relevant to our council in the operation of our own activities. The RTC has lifted that slightly and looked more at the system perspective about what we're needing to try and achieve.
And just to add to that, all of the other bodies that are members of RTC are writing their own submissions as well. So the Hamilton maintenance issues or the South Waikato resilience issues are coming out through their submissions. If we are silent on our own needs and rely on the RTC submission, we undersell our own needs. And that was the thinking here about us as an organisation creating our own statement. But all of the other feedback, we can do with this whatever we want.
No, I can support that approach, that we should use this to highlight the bits that are most important to this council. I suppose where I'm trying to make the trade-off in my head is that I would like to see the regional council be able to speak to the needs of the whole region. I would like us as an organization to illustrate how a collective view is a stronger view for the Waikato region. So I'm trying to find the sweet spot of trade-off on that. I suppose just me personally, I'm quite keen to get a copy of whatever that RTC is, submission is, because I want to make sure that I'm across it. So that, you know, as all of us are in different realms, we can echo the thoughts that are put forward in that. I suppose one thing I wanted to raise, there was a comment at the UNISA meeting yesterday about the and it may be in here, so please tell me if it is. They were referring to the desire that funds collected for road transport should be spent on road transport. So they were encouraging us in our submissions to ask the ministry how they intend to address the non-roading investment. You know, so really clearly asking, okay, we get your intent here, so then what are we going to do for the non-roading? So have we asked that in here?
Through paragraph, some of the investment for rail rate through that one. So it addresses some of what you've just described, but it doesn't necessarily go as far as it.
I think it was more of a philosophical type of
and that's
question.
the concept. And actually how we go fund transport. Last GPS there was what was considered to be cross subsidization of funds. So really covered via funding system applied to structure. The awards we of that GPS. Only thing that I think would be is track user charges that tax track user charges that come through that might have an overlap in that space, but otherwise moving back more towards a pure hypothecated fund in terms of the revenue received and recovered via the roading system as applied to loading activities. So that might address some of those issues of cross subsidization. So the rail is effectively being split.
Yeah, and I understand their desire to stop that cross subsidization. But my question is okay, so you're going to stop that. How are you going to fund the other one?
Oh, right. In terms of the deficit that might have existed in rail or in roading.
Yeah.
So the
Cycling and walking and
Sorry,
although the other way we move.
so the RTC submission and lots of the other submissions we've seen do have section on system change, and I think we would be able to pull something from our submission to RTC straight into this related to that system change issue, which is about the future revenue situation and longer term planning and several other things that are included in that section. So this idea of these visions are great, but how we're going to deliver them is actually, and what's the role of local government in that story is a key part of what we suggest collectively. And I've seen it in the LGNZ one, I've seen it in the CC one, I'm all talking about ourselves as being part of this story, and we need to make sure that we're putting through a strong statement about local government's role in this as well.
And do you feel that given that previous conversation we had about what's right in ours versus what's right in RTC, do you see it sitting nicely in ours?
I think absolutely, yes, if we come into ours, we can bring that in.
Yeah.
With your support. We want to be there as an organisation as well as a region in terms of communities.
Said a couple of points. I did email both of you about the nationwide ticketing system. As it directly affects us as a PT provider. Are we including anything around?
Included in the RTC one. So because we'd received those comments before the RTC one is written, so I have included a specific commentary on the NTS and requirement to make sure that's. But we
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it also needs to be in this one, just for those efficiencies, and regionally.
to see where that came through. So and we nearly used your words verbatim in the RTC one, which is calling to attention the fact that the draft GPS is silent on investment in national ticketing for PT, which is considered a critically strategic investment. So we can incorporate that
Yes, the funding.
into that one too. And so making sure that we have that statement put alongside it.
And just a question around paragraph 4, strategic priorities. Not sure if this goes into the RTC one or stays in this one, but I think that land use planning and transport is our core business. I just think a couple of the sentences are a little bit weak. We say we would want to see this identified in the GPS, and then we are keen to protect corridors. But again, I think we need to be bold. It's essential that we need to protect corridors, and you know, Hamilton is the fastest growing city, and this is where our step change is going to happen with buses and rapid transport. So maybe just, you know, highlighting that our metro, you know, is the anchor on which all our PT goes. So I'm not sure if, obviously Hamilton will be submitting on their own, but as a region, Hamilton is core to our PT services. So yeah, we need that recognition alongside Auckland and Wellington.
So specifically coming back to integrated land use, that area, the RTC, including the recommendation that amendments should be made to both LTMA and when the RM sort of dropped out, to make sure that they're overlapped and consistent in that space. But again, we can strengthen that in our own submission too, because it is a core area of our work.
Again, just in paragraph 5, making sure employment is in there. Okay. Not just all the fluffy stuff. You know, people
Need to get a work.
yeah. Things that this DPS is so focused on economics and efficiencies. You need to use their language.
I had the same feedback, just on paragraph 4, 13 and 14. I eventually figured out that what we wanted to say is that we want the Metro Spatial Plan on the list of projects. If we could put that up front, what our ask is, and then go into the detail of why that's our ask is, I think it's much easier for anyone reading it to pick up what we want. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, probably we mentioned North Waikato again. Yeah, it's probably enough in there about those growth areas. And maybe just mention that interregional collaboration is really important where the boundary lines are so randomly put.
So can I and excuse my ignorance on this, but I assume the RTC is the collective for the region, whereas,
Each district council and us.
and so we've communicated with, and it's not this committee's purview to look at that, but I'm concerned that our submission is very much Waikato Regional Council, but I'd like to think that that also includes anything which may be of concern, major concern, if you like, for people in the region.
So the RTC one is definitely a collective. So the WRC chairs it in terms of our local authority partners are represented around it, including Whakamutunga. And so we take account of their views through that process too. And I know it's not the purview of this committee to have the oversight, but there is significant overlap in terms of what we should be.
Same messages.
This one. And so as Phil mentioned, I'll be putting finishing touches on that, and we're circulating it to the Regional Transport Committee today for the input. Mostly because it's sort of out of sequence to the RTC reporting cycle, but we have an opportunity through that process to get it done ahead of the deadline. Members prepped.
And it sounds as if you'd like us to circulate it to our councillors as well, so that you will have a copy of that.
I think that's probably.
That's helpful for you to see the context.
Would that be useful for the broader council or the members in here? Or just
I am interested in it.
Just
But
look it out.
yeah,
I mean,
and
then
if they
nobody
read
can
it, they
say-
read it.
I mean, they're
Yeah.
public anyway. We put all our submissions up on the website, so it's fine.
Again, are we speaking to this one?
Yeah, that was.
This isn't a process that has a hearing, so no, we don't. We won't, nobody will speak to the submissions on this process.
Mm.
There's literally 5 or 6 days for the whole
10 days.
hundreds of submissions around the country to end up in the final. As you say.
Just imagining all of the submissions in like one of them bingo cages and just tumbling around.
We're wondering whether they could somehow pull out the key. But we've actually got some work to do.
I had a question on Te Huia. I just wondered, wouldn't we request clarity on things like the fire rate going forward, or just more detail on Te Huia mentioned, or is the GPS just too high level?
Te Huia is not mentioned in the government policy statement.
Did we expect it to be though?
I was
Something
hoping.
along,
We were hoping it would be good news. We wouldn't want it to be in there and be bad news. So not being in there to me is not terrible. But we've made a statement in here about Te Huia. We can bolster that with some of the things that we're putting into the Auckland one, if you like, or context, because this is an opportunity to talk to the minister.
yeah.
We should take
I mean, it was really just, are we asking for all the clarity we need on the rail topic? That's all. Yeah.
And to some of Phil's commentary there too, the concept of funding. So we've definitely asked for the surety of funding, because that's what's missing in the GPS. Subsequent
Detail.
That's almost, it needs to be negotiated at the NZTA board level. So
Makes sense.
that ongoing investment in how much they put that one. But what we have said here is there is not enough money for rail. We need more to come through. And then we have the conversation, how much can we extract out of Whakamutunga for our services?
Does that really come through that we say that we feel there needs to be more funding for?
It definitely does in the RTC report, but
Gotcha.
I can bring that statement back saying, you know, we've seen underinvestment here, particularly when it comes to regional rail. So they've removed an entire activity class,
Yeah.
regional rail activity class.
Are we? And
Regional transport.
just along those lines, the LGNZ submission on the GPS is specifically asking for reinstatement of the interregional public transport activity class. Are we going that far?
We are with the RTC one, not in our,
Well, because
we see one here.
because we're the provider of that service, I think we should bring that into this.
I think we should.
Yeah, I quite agree, Pam. It's a good point. There should be alignment between the two. The thing the government's looking for is what's going to help the economy, grow the economy and boost the economy. So anything you can put in that's going to assist that is likely to get more support than negative.
I only pulled out 3 things left that I hadn't mentioned. One was paragraph 11 on fare box recovery. Suggested here, we can make a statement about recent successes we've seen implementing frequent services such as the Meteor. And then are we willing to make a statement that we suspect an increased ability to put on frequent services would lead to higher patronage, as we've seen, and thereby lead to potential higher proportion of fare box recovery, because we have all that detail about how it could become self-defeating after a while with lower patronage, but we have a method that maximize fare recovery as well. I just thought there could be a nice balance there. I brought that in just from our real life experience. And then great to point out that the significant omission about how the transport emissions will be reduced, not being, yeah, it's not in there. I would have just added a second sentence to say that the Waikato's transport sector emissions are still continually increasing, as in the why we think that's an emission, why we care, why. That's the one category that's increasing for us, and hence that's why we're asking for that focus to be explained. And then the last one was paragraph 5 on public transport. It comes across as if public transport and positive economic outcomes are not related. But having just gone again through peak traffic in Hamilton and the fact we're asking for increased PT in Hamilton, there's a piece to be said around how the positive economic outcome can happen when we have the reduced congestion at peak times. Hence, we're asking for the Metro Spatial Plan funding. So just wanted to make that link there.
It's a very good link, and
Mainly the city, obviously, mainly peak time.
there was a big discussion for our regional advisory group technical advisors yesterday who made that same comment that if
We'll just balance
it's
it,
congested network, your trucks move faster.
which is the point of all the
So,
roads.
and that's where the multimodal concept comes in, because then otherwise, if you've got all of those modes sharing the same space, you're reducing the speed of the lowest common denominator, right? But
So if you're happy to add a sentence, that'd be great.
I'm very supportive of that, and I can tell you our technical advisors are too.
And the very last one was, I just thought, considering how interested the government is, or any government should be, on potential for reducing the cost of living, that frequency of public transport that does allow other lifestyles that have a lower cost of living versus owning and maintaining and servicing a car. Don't need to say it like that. It's just, I thought cost of living link to public transport provision would be worth mentioning in the paragraph somewhere. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, probably one last point is just in paragraph 5, just making sure we do reference employment
Yes,
alongside the other outcomes that we're seeking.
well done. Clearly, I put a big paragraph. Employment isn't.
I just question whether healthcare should be included, because that is a separate service at the moment, being often through the hospital service.
Everyday people catching the bus to appointments, dentists.
In rural areas, it is, yes. In the urban area, they need the public service. And we do work closely with the hospital.
Yeah, partnership with the
Make sure that we've got a comment on that list too.
But where it makes sense to point out, we are talking from very much a city perspective, because the rest of the region doesn't always apply to the same degree, and people could discount it and say,
We hope, and that's where through the RTC submission, we actually hope to get
yes,
that balance, but we're also quite cognizant that because of the size of the urban environments that we've got, they do still attract a very significant portion of our transport investment. But what we have tried to do is fit that balance to say, actually, not everything's going to sit in the urban environment. Here's some rural investment considerations we need to take account of too.
oh,
All right.
So there's a few modifications. But I mean, really, I think it's really strengthened our position as a council. The process by which we reflect. Oh, sorry.
Revolution up there.
That's already.
I would suggest that you perhaps change the delegation from the chair to the deputy chair or someone who is present.
Pam can sign off on it.
So rather than chair of the subcommittee, chair of
Just
the
chair of the
council.
Yeah,
There's across it all.
And
Barely. Take it.
at the moment, the draft has my signature on it, but whereas the submission to the Auckland Council,
Wondered.
it's yourself and Chris, I'd be far comfortable if it was yourself and Chris who signed it,
Yeah.
if you'd support that.
That's kind of.
Sure, we can do that. I know that it's varied in the past. You know, sometimes it comes from the director, sometimes it comes from Chris.
I think given this is the GPS, it would make sense to be
Yeah.
a chair.
Should be.
Okay.
At the chair.
Yeah.
Because I had a comment here around how.
Sorry, Pam,
It's-
I'm gonna have to leave.
Sure.
Phil will fill me in on the remainder. I just have to go and zoom into my Tomo right now. Thank you very much. for your-
Thanks for your
very much for your
presentation. Cheers.
That's sort of mixed in the past, and I saw this and I thought about it. Well, sometimes there are staff submissions and sometimes there are council submissions that come to this. And it would be really nice to have the consistency that anything that comes to the submission subcommittee or council as the chair and CE or. And then people can really see the difference immediately as to whether something was a staff submission or not.
Quite often though, it is delegated to the chair of the committee. And I think because these are of national significance, it should be the leaders of the council.
Yeah, I agree.
signing off on it.
So going forward, something to consider to help people understand when it's gone through council and when
Yeah.
it's not.
I don't actually have my signature ended on this.
All right, Phil.
You like to keep things on the download, don't you? It's always a spokesperson for council.
So can I just get back to normality? So we've got the submission. Dave's made the change to the delegation for signing. Thanks for that, Dave. So we all happy with,
I had just sent one note of a quick question, but after that, I'm happy to move it. And that was a question for Phil. Is there anything else to request in the DPS for clarification that would relate to the switch to EV buses? That fleet switch and depots and.
So the minister had a column in a document called The Loop, which is the Bus and Coach Association newsletter, where he said that he is thinking about the sustainable public transport framework and may look to make some changes later this year. I know.
But the GPS itself,
GPS itself
too high level again.
is too high.
I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, thanks.
In that case, happy to move.
thanks, Jen. Thanks, Pam, seconded. All in favour? It's carried. Right, thank you, Phil. Anything else to be discussed? Nothing else on the agenda, so if I can ask Janine to close the meeting.
Ona hia, mai te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te hininara, te ara takatū, kua rā e rongo, kairi ake ki runga, kia tīna,
Yeah.
umie, huie, tai.
Thank you, Janine, and I want to thank Dave and councillors for your attendance. Apologise against my lateness.
I never thought I'd see it.